Good afternoon. My name is Melanie Carr. I'm Head of Stakeholders and Communication here at the European Medicines Agency. It's my pleasure to welcome you and thank you for joining us at this webinar, our first dedicated to the topic of medicines shortages. Of course, shortages is a subject that affects us all, patients, pharmacists, doctors, and more generally healthcare systems across Europe and beyond. And while this is our first public webinar on shortages, it builds on a tradition of transparency and dialogue. You may recall our public meetings during the COVID-19 pandemic, where we shared data and insights on the safety and effectiveness of vaccines. These meetings proved invaluable for public health and trust in our regulatory system. They brought the thinking of our experts and our decision-making processes into the open when the public needed to hear about them. Today, we're turning our attention to shortages of medicines because this is an issue that continues to challenge us. It's not new, but it is persistent. Hardly a day goes by without a headline reporting a shortage. According to a consumer survey carried out in 2022, between 1/5 and almost a half of respondents had experienced a medicines shortage once in the last 2 years running up to that survey. We understand the anxiety and disruption this causes. For patients, it can mean delays in treatment or uncertainty about alternatives. For healthcare professionals, it adds pressure, more time spent sourcing medicines, managing expectations, and coordinating care. Medicine shortages are complex. They stem from a mix of geopolitical tensions, supply chain vulnerabilities, manufacturing constraints, and even human behavior. No single actor can solve this alone. If we want to make a difference, we really need to work together. In the EU, policymakers, regulators, and healthcare providers are doing just that, working together to develop effective strategies to prevent and manage medicines shortages as a matter of priority. At EMA, we've been working to address shortages from multiple angles. We collaborate with national regulators, manufacturers, and international partners to strengthen our supply chains and prevent disruptions. For example, when there are recent shortages of blood clot medications, we acted swiftly, identifying alternative suppliers outside the EU and extending shelf lives to ensure medicines weren't wasted. But we also recognize our limits. Some factors are beyond our control. Most of what we can do comes down to influencing, coordinating, monitoring, and communicating. Like today's webinar, we are here not just to share what EMA is doing, but to listen, to learn, and to engage. We want to ensure that patients, healthcare professionals, and the public have the right information so they can make informed decisions, understand the challenges, and contribute to solutions. Transparency, of course, is key. It builds trust, counters misinformation, and it empowers. So over the next 2 hours, you'll hear from our experts. We'll explore the causes of shortages, their impact, and the concrete steps that we can take to mitigate them. We'll also discuss how you, whether you're a patient, a pharmacist, or a concerned citizen, can prepare and play a role. By introducing you to our ongoing work at EMA, this meeting will give you different perspectives and insights on the issue of medicines shortages to help you make informed decisions. We're looking forward to embracing this opportunity together and learning from each other today. Thank you. I'd now like to pass the floor to Juan Garcia Burgos, who's head of our Public Stakeholders Department and who will chair today's meeting. Over to you, Juan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melanie, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to have this first public webinar on shortages that indeed I will be moderating. And we are welcoming colleagues in the WebEx, but also online. And we is already connected online. And today's webinar is a response to a request from patients and healthcare professionals representatives who are asking us to explain better what shortages are and what measures or what is the way that the authorities, together with other parties, with all stakeholders, are taking in order to manage and to try to improve the situation when this shortage comes up. So today we will try to raise awareness about the current landscape of medicine shortages in the EU and identify the factors which drives them, to present the latest tools and the initiatives that the EMA and the member states have to manage shortages, to share the knowledge and the best practice we will learn from a few examples that colleagues will be presenting, and then foster open dialogue and promote transparency, because we have tried to explain better, to communicate better to the public and the patients and the healthcare professionals the way we manage these shortages. So we have tried to design this webinar as accessible and as informative as possible. We have tried to provide information in a way which is clear and easy to understand for everyone. And we will go through a series of presentations addressing the different topics. And afterwards, we will complement with a question and answer session. For the question and answer session, this will be open to the people who are in the WebEx room, so they can ask the questions directly. But we also invite colleagues who are following in the broadcast to submit questions, which is possible through the Slido that will be provided afterwards on the slides. So during the presentations, if you already have questions, you can use the Slido and you can start submitting them, and we will take it later. The webinar will be recorded because it will be made publicly available afterwards, so that it can be used as a resource to better understand what shortages are and how we are managing them. And it will be published together with all the materials, all the presentations, and so that it can be used, and hopefully it is useful for everyone to understand what shortages are. So this is the Slido that you can already use with your telephone, with your mobile, in order to submit questions at any time, and we will take it at the end. So without any further introduction, I will give the first presentation to introduce the subject, to introduce what shortages are. And I think shortages, and if we go to the first slide, is something which has increasingly happening in the last years, more than it used to be in the past. And this happens and affects patients, affects healthcare professionals as well in the clinical act. And because of that, more and more we have seen news about that. I'm sure that all of you have seen in your newspapers recently, in last years, or recently, some news about shortages which affects patients in different conditions. For example, here we have some examples of shortages which have affected people with cancer or people with epilepsy, etc. So what is for regulators a shortage? We have been discussing, and the shortage is when the supply of a medicine does not meet the demand of that medicine in a member state, in a country, at national level. And this is independently of what is the cause. It doesn't matter what has originated the shortage. When this happens in a country, it's considered by us regulators a shortage. In practice, it doesn't mean that any medicine which is missing can be a shortage, because sometimes it's missing in a pharmacy, but perhaps it's available in another one. And that's not considered a shortage. For a shortage to be considered as such, it has to affect the whole country. And the reality is that when there are issues which leads to a shortage of a medicine, it's rarely only affecting one country. Very often it affects several countries. And therefore, perhaps a EU action, a collective and coordinated action is needed. So who is affected by shortages? Well, the reality is that shortages affects all parties. Of course, the most, let's say, vulnerable ones, the ones who perhaps suffer it most, are the patients, because suddenly they realize that they cannot take the medicine they are having because there is not availability of it, and it means that they have to take less, or that they have to switch to another alternative because the medicine they use is no longer available. And this alternative perhaps is less effective, or has other side effects, or is less affordable, and it may have an impact on their disease because it may worsen, or even there is a risk of medication errors because of the change to that medicine, and it creates a situation of stress. This is also lived by the healthcare professionals because they will have to deal with this situation. which is that they cannot provide the treatment that their patient needs, and they will have to look for alternatives, and they will have to also manage this risk of medication errors or this challenging situation which affects the clinical act as such. Companies are affected as well because they will have to face a lot of regulatory changes, requirements, and they take actions in order to find and contribute to solve the situation, and it has an impact on their reputation as well. And definitely, regulators will need to adapt their practices, they need to adapt their process, they need to take measures, extra measures, after challenges, and it provides a strain on the regulatory process. No, in addition, it is quite frustrating realizing that the medicines that regulators recommend for approval perhaps cannot be made available to the patients that need. So next, in a nutshell, I think what we can conclude is that the shortage affects all of us. And shortages affect, if we go to the next slide, shortages affect all areas and all products. It's not only limited to medicines. However, what we can say is that the medicine supply chain is especially or uniquely complex. And for example, to illustrate that is that the materials which are used to produce a medicine, very often they come from different parts of the planet. And even the countries... Oh, sorry, could you please keep muted? Thank you. Companies, sometimes they don't keep a large stock of medicine, and this also creates a limited capacity to react if there are shortages. Often production takes place in highly specialized factories, which is very good because this means that the product which is produced is of the highest quality. But on the other hand, if something affects these factories, then the impact on shortages will be huge. As a way of illustration, what we can say is that an example is that the medicine travels twice around the world before reaching local pharmacies. And this is a way to illustrate how complex is the supply chain. So the supply chain can be defined as a system that transforms the raw materials into a medicine. So we have, on the first hand, the suppliers, we have the active substance, the excipients, the packaging, all that is used in order to manufacture the medicine. And then there is an element of distribution, the wholesale distribution, and then it goes to the pharmacies, and then the healthcare professionals, prescribes, and the patients. So as you can see, it's a supply chains problem. At any moment of the supply chains, a problem can occur. If we go to the next slide, and illustrates that even if it happens at any time, it will have a knock-on effect on the rest. And the patient is at the extreme and at the end of this chain, which means that eventually they will be hit. Another aspect is to analyze what can create a shortage, what can disrupt the medicine supply chains. Well, we have from public health emergencies, and a very good case to illustrate that is disease outbreaks or even the pandemic, the recent pandemic we have, where it can imply a demand on certain medicines or also affect in different ways to the supply chain. Natural disaster, we have many good examples of that. It's something that hopefully doesn't happen very often, but hurricanes, floods, earthquakes, all that can damage factories and can disrupt transport routes and can affect severely the supply chain. Societal factors is also important, and here we have change in populations or change in healthcare trends or needs, which can affect the demand of the medicine, and therefore we need to have some adjustments in order to avoid these shortages. Geopolitical issues, conflicts. We are very recently now we are hearing about tariffs, which can complicate and can create a lot of tensions that can affect the way medicines are distributed and that becomes available to patients. Manufacturing issues such as a quality defect or any issue affecting the company factory, which of course will have an impact on shortages. And then economical and commercial, because at the end of the day, sometimes it's a decision from the company, perhaps to withdraw a medicine from the market for economical reasons or for marketing strategy. And this may have, depending on the alternatives which may be available, an impact on their availability. So here is just to illustrate with examples, and if we can, I think we can go to the next part of the slide, how a natural disaster outside the EU can affect the supply in the EU. And this refers to last year Hurricane Helene, which in the US, it was in North Carolina, and there were floodings at the manufacturing site and of the perfusion solutions, and this led to a shortage in the EU. Another example, maybe not so recent, but it was very well, it was in the public domain. If we can go to the next part of the slide. It was an earthquake and a tsunami in Japan. It was in 2011. And it created a disruption in the fishing operations with wild salmon. And it was the wild salmon sperm that was used to manufacture protamine, which is a medicine which is used in surgery to counteract the effect of heparin, which is an anticoagulant. And there was in the EU, there was a shortage of protamine because of this cause. So this is just an example to see how natural disasters can have such an effect on medicine shortages. What is important to mention is that not all shortages have the same impact on the patients. And thankfully, some of them, and more, can be easily solved and managed so that there is no big impact. Actually, there is some data which supports that 4 out of 10 patients who experience a shortage said that the shortage caused a problem. There are always ways by which can mitigate and find solutions to avoid a bigger impact. The impact actually depends on 2 main factors. One is the seriousness of the disease to be treated, and also is the availability of alternatives. And this is critical because this is what will make that we distinguish the medicine as critical versus non-critical. And as you can imagine, a shortage of a non-critical medicine is easily manageable, while a shortage of a critical medicine has important consequences. So I think we can move the slides ahead. But the shortage can affect one member state, in which case measures are taken at national level at these member states. And I think we have to distinguish whether it is a critical or not critical medicine, because it has huge implications on the way we are going to handle. But then when it happens to affect more than one member state, then the impact is higher at EU level and very often may require that there is an EU action. So if we go to the next, so not all shortages require a new response. Only those who cannot be solved at national level requires to be escalated. So it's trying to build as a system which is well coordinated and which is as efficient as possible. So if we go to the next slide, just to summarize what we have said is that it's unique, the complexity of the medicine supply chains, but it's unique at the same time it's very fragile. And we see that because we see that by the number of shortages will continue happening. The reason for it can happen at anywhere in the supply chains, and this can cause shortages, but the shortages will have a different impact. Not all have the same. And depending on the impact, we will address them in different manner. We need to have a system which is able to tailor to the specific needs of each shortage. Shortages that cannot be solved at national level then are escalated at EU level, and we will learn more now in the next presentations. So thank you very much for this. I think we'll not take questions at this stage because we will do it later. But of course, if you have any question, you can submit them through the Slido. And in order to continue, it's my pleasure now to introduce Laure Geslin from the European Commission. Laure is the policy officer at DG Santé, working directly on shortages, and Laure is going to give us an introduction on the latest policy initiatives which are being taken by the European Commission. Thank you very much, Laure, to be here with us and to provide this update.
Thank you, Juan. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm Laure Geslin. I work in DG Santé for the European Commission, and I will briefly touch upon the actions that the Commission has taken at the EU level to address the issue of medicine shortages. And first of all, I think what's really a most important message I want to pass here is that the issue of medicine shortages is really a key priority for the European Commission. And I will explain a bit the different initiatives that we have taken to address this issue at the EU level. So first, it's not the first initiative, but the first really important legal tool that the Commission has put forward to address the issue of shortages in structural time. So not just in the context of a crisis like the COVID crisis, but really structural day-to-day shortages. The Commission has put forward with the proposed revision of the EU General Pharmaceutical legislation different measures that aim to address the issue of shortages at the EU level. And that was proposed in April 2023. And I will briefly touch upon some of the main elements there. In the Commission proposal, we propose stronger measures on the pharmaceutical companies. For instance, obligations for the pharmaceutical companies to inform the authorities or notify the authorities when they know that there will be a shortage, and at least 6 months in advance, or when they know the shortage will arise. And this is really important because it allows then the authorities to, well in advance, try to find solutions and avoid that the shortage would happen after all. That's an important obligation we propose. The other one is the obligation for pharmaceutical companies to hold what we call shortage prevention plans to prevent shortages. In essence, pharmaceutical companies need to look at potential risks in their supply chain and take the necessary measures to avoid these risks from materializing into shortages. What this proposal also put forward is a framework to for the countries in the EU and the European Medicines Agency to work together when there is a critical shortage, to be able to escalate that at the EU level and to find solutions together. And finally, the proposal also puts forward a union list of critical medicines, which is a list of the most important medicines at the EU level that are used to treat serious diseases and where we see there are insufficient alternative treatments options available. And in this proposal, we set forward a few measures for those specific critical medicines to make sure that we avoid shortages for those medicines. So that's what we proposed with the revision of the general legislation on pharmaceuticals in the EU. But this was not considered sufficient in terms of addressing the structural cause of shortages, the underlying root causes, such as one of which is the fact that we see that we rely too much on productions of medicines outside of the Union, and that makes us dependent. And that's why our President von der Leyen, asked the Commissioner for Health at the EU level to propose a Critical Medicines Act to address the severe shortages of medicines and reduce dependencies related to critical medicines and their ingredients. And this, next slide please, is what the Commission put forward in March this year. So a proposal for a Critical Medicines Act, which complements the general pharmaceutical legislation. And here, on top of the obligations that we already proposed, we also propose other measures to make sure that we have more production in the EU for the most critical medicines and also their ingredients. So we propose measures to facilitate investments in manufacturing capacity in the EU by the identification of strategic projects, which can then be related to certain benefits and also facilitated access to funding. But of course, it's not sufficient to support investments for more manufacturing capacity in the EU. We also need to make sure that those products produced with more resilient supply chains, that there is an actual demand for that. And that's why the proposal also puts forward certain measures in the context of the purchase of those medicines by the authorities, the procurers. When they buy medicines, the proposal says that it has to be done not only looking at the medicines that have the lowest price, but also the medicines that can have certain more resilient supply chain, diversified supply chains, etc. And for the most critical medicines, where we have seen that there is really a high dependency from outside the EU, there would also be the obligation to procure, to buy these medicines by favoring those that are produced in the EU. Third part of the proposal is also collaborative procurement, and that allows the countries to buy medicines together with the support of the European Commission, and that could cover critical medicines, but also other medicines where we see that there is a problem in making these medicines available in the different countries. Because, for instance, the quantities are very low, for instance, for rare diseases or for new antimicrobials. So member states can ask the support of the Commission to buy these together at the EU level. And finally, of course, we are very well aware that it will probably never be possible to have production capacity for all the critical medicines and their ingredients in the EU. So we also need to look at ways to work together with other countries, like-minded countries, and have partnerships so that we can diversify our supply. So this proposal the Commission has put forward to complement the first proposal in a view to tackle the different root causes of medicine shortages, with, of course, the hope that this will materialize in more availability of medicines, more accessibility, and a direct impact for the patients. And this was a very short point I wanted to make to show that really at the EU level, this problem is taken very seriously. We've put forward several measures to address the problem. And I'm very happy also to see that in the next presentations, you will see how this is then done concretely by the European Medicines Agency together with the member states. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laure, for this very clear overview of initiatives at political level and to send this clear message of how important shortages is for the European Commission. So we move now to the next presentation. And here we would like to learn more about what measures EMA and national authorities are taking to address that. And we have Emmanuel Cormier, who is the head of the Regulatory Science and Innovation Task Force. And Emmanuel will give us a concise but a comprehensive overview of how we are managing shortages at EU level. Thank you, Emmanuel.
Thank you, Juan, and good afternoon, everyone. And indeed, it would be a high-level overview of what we're doing, and there's quite a bit in that sense of what we're doing at the agency, but also in collaboration with our colleagues at the national authorities to address shortages in Europe. So first of all, a reminder, and you probably heard it a couple of times already in the presentations before, shortages are complex, and the solution to shortages are also complex. They involve many players or stakeholders in the ecosystem, in the healthcare ecosystem, and therefore also many different types of tools that we could implement to manage these shortages. So in other words, shortages are not all created equal, and not one size fits all solution can be applied. And at the European Medicine Agency, we are involved in the management and prevention of shortage that cannot be solved at the national level or for shortages that are actually affecting multiple countries in Europe. So our responsibility is very much about the coordination of the European responses through a dedicated set of groups, if you will, of cooperating a platform to do so. And there's two such groups that I would like to outline here, which is the single point of contact working party, and I promise we won't have too many acronyms here, which primary responsibility is to monitor shortages, but also to address initial actions and plans for, if you will, general shortages as they come in. And the second group, which is the Medicine Shortage Steering Group, is more in the context of the response and recommendation, but also providing a strategic dimension to the EU responses that we've put in place together. Now, of course, what is also important to outline, and that's also been already alluded to by the presentation of Laure, is we need to change our mindset, and this is something that's already happening, from a focus on limiting the impact of shortages to more of how can we prevent shortages from occurring at the first place. So again, management of shortages in Europe is a collective responsibility and a collective effort. It calls upon the coordinated actions of regulators around the table of that collective effort. The European Commission in developing the legislation and implementing the policy measures, the European Medicine Agency in that coordination of the EU response, but very much so the national competent authorities, first of all, in monitoring the instances of shortages, also making recommendations, but also implementing national measures, as well as communicating to the stakeholders within the national environment, but also interacting at the level of the European supporting and cooperation we've put in place. It's a collective effort that involves companies, and companies in the wide sense of the term, not just the manufacturers, but also the distributor, the wholesalers of medicines, in monitoring, but sharing information, as well as reporting as early as possible a potential risk of shortages. It's also the responsibility of companies to increase supply and manage distribution in a fair way across Europe, as well as implementing some of the recommendation that we regulators offer to companies to help address some of these issue of shortages. And it's, of course, a responsibility and a collective effort that involves patients and healthcare professionals. Patients in the way patients can stay informed on issues of shortages, but also possibilities around how to mitigate for these shortages. Actions such as not asking for more medicine that's needed, not hoarding medicine, or ordering on time medicine, so planning ahead as much as possible can make a difference in the way we approach management of shortages. And healthcare professional, as well, in the way they report instances of shortages or identify alternative and working collaboratively with patients in that process, but also in the way supplies of medicines are managed at the level of the pharmacy, for example. So this is very much a collaborative effort, but I would like to dive a little bit more into details in the next slide on what we're doing to engage more specifically with and support companies to manage shortages. The first thing is to gather information, and we need to have a better view on what are the supplies at the level of the European and the member states of certain medicines. We can support companies to increase the supply of medicine, but also to distribute more fairly medicines across Europe. However, we as regulators cannot force manufacturers to produce more medicines, for example. That says we can allow more flexibility in some of the rules we have in place. And here are two examples. We can approve for longer shelf life for medicine. In other words, we can extend the expiration dates of medicines. Granted, we have sufficient data to demonstrate that the medicines are still safe and efficacious for the condition that they're being used for. We could also facilitate exemption on certain labeling requirements of medicine or packaging. As you're aware, we're a European Union of 27 countries with different language and packaging requirements. And maybe if we can provide some exemptions, such as the use of packaging in English, for example, then we can go a long way in mitigating some of the shortages that are occurring at a European level. In the next slide, I will speak to how we engage with patient healthcare professionals in our management of shortages. The first part, of course, is for us to engage directly with the patients which are affected and the healthcare professionals which are affected by the instances of shortages to better understand the situation. So gathering feedback for us is very important. And we've done that, and we continue to do that in the context of antibiotics, for example. Every winter season, we monitor the situation proactively so that we are better prepared in case of potential shortages of antibiotics in winter. But we've done similar exercise in the case of GLP-1 receptor agonists, which is a class of molecule that's used for the treatment of diabetes or for weight loss intervention. From that feedback, we provide recommendations that are suitable for patient but healthcare professional. It could be, for example, prioritizing existing patients on medicines that are in shortage, as opposed to enrolling additional patients on that medicine, and maybe favoring provision of alternative to medicines for new patients. We do provide communications to inform and guide decision-making in that patient healthcare professional interaction. We have a shortage catalog that is published on our website that provides an inventory of the shortage in Europe. We do circulate letters to healthcare professionals to help them in their decision-making process and engage with the patient they treat. We engage in social media campaigns and also public statements so that the information reaches the right individuals at the right time. It's important to remember that, as was explained earlier in the presentation, shortages are not just affecting Europe. They're also a global problem. So it's very important that we engage not only within the European environment, but also with the international partners when we're dealing with shortages. It's understanding and identifying information that could help us prepare ahead of time, in particular on the demand side of things. So identifying early signs of shortages within EU, but also internationally. And if we take the example of Australia, their winter season starts earlier than ours. So can we tease out information that will help us prepare for our winter season should we face issues of antibiotic demand that are unusual? It's about sharing good practices across regulators, what works, what doesn't work, and then coordinating responses, joint assessment, and harmonized communication on shortages, but also collaborate and align across the European countries on actions to take so that an action that's taken at the member state level does not affect the other member states in Europe. So it's very important for us to coordinate that and all together to avoid duplication in the way we cooperate at the European level. Yeah, so now I'll just say a few words on what we do to prevent shortages. And prevention is very much about avoiding shortages from occurring at the first place. And in order to prevent effectively, you need to access information. So so how do we improve reporting and monitoring of potential shortage? So in other words, the principle here is you can't fix what you don't see. Again, access to information is what will make a difference for us. And in order to facilitate our transition from reaction to prevention, and Laura alluded to that already, we've put together what's called the Union List of Critical Medicine, which is a compilation, if you will, of the medicines that are deemed to be essential for the healthcare system in Europe. We're working with companies to put in place short-term prevention plans to identify maybe vulnerabilities in some of these supply chains of medicines. And based on some of the learning, we have put forward a set of recommendations to strengthen the supply chains of critical medicine that can be used once potential risk on supply chains have been identified. Of course, Laura spoke to this initiative at the European level on the Critical Medicine Act and the European Pharmaceutical Legislation Reform, which are really ways to crystallize, if you will, that European ambition and efforts moving forward. But it's important to remind ourselves and be patient, unfortunately, in that sense, that some of these measures that we are currently working on may take time to actually take effect. So I'd just like to bring your attention to an example now, kind of the spotlight on the voluntary solidarity mechanism. So what is that? It's a mechanism that's put in place that would allow the member states to request assistance from another member state or other member states to obtain stocks of medicines for which they are currently experiencing critical shortages. So this is coordinated at the level of the European Medicine Agency, and it is to be used as a last resort to temporarily alleviate critical shortage in member states. So it's not for long-term solution. And it is when there is no alternative for that medicines available in the member state, or that other measure that could have been taken have been exhausted without success, and that the short-term measures are no longer possible. So it was put in place about 2 years ago, and we've had 12 instances or requests that have been received. And medicines have been sourced in all cases for at least by at least one member state, one member state was able to help the other member state in need. So again, illustrating the importance of a cooperation at the European level and the successful implementation of action that we've had through the voluntary solidarity mechanism. So now for conclusion, I would like to re-emphasize, if I could get the next slide, please, that Shortages, again, is a shared responsibility. It involves all the actors in the ecosystems, one way or another. We as regulators have put in place a set of tools that we can use and deploy for the right type of shortage at the right time, if you will. And it's very important that we shift our mindset from that reactive, to that proactive ambition. So prevention of medicine is what we need to focus on moving forward, and the legislative environment is what's going to allow us to do that. And finally, I will say that by working together, we can achieve a more resilient, reliable, and sustainable medicine supply for the European patient. And with this, I'll hand it back to you, Juan, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. And again, to be so clear, we appreciate the regulatory process are not always easy and they're very technical. And I think you have managed, I appreciate very much the effort to really simplify and explain it in such a clear manner. So to complement that, we are going to have now a few examples of measures that we have taken and how it has been working. And to present them, we have Mónica Díaz, who is the head of availability and supply of medicines and devices, and who is fully involved in these activities. And she will provide us with real cases and see how it has worked in real life. Thank you, Mónica, for presenting.
Thank you, Juan, and good afternoon, everyone. So I will take you now through some of the measures that we implemented based on our toolkit with the agency EMA together with the national competent authorities to tackle shortages. So I will focus on critical shortages, so those that were managed at EU level through these EU coordinated actions and these measures that are available in our toolkit. And this is, of course, done already in addition to the measures that are applied at national level. I will focus on some case studies where we had critical shortage of critical medicines. And as already been explained by the previous presenters, critical medicines are those that are used to treat life-threatening diseases, serious disease, and for which often we do not have alternatives. I will also explain how we cooperated with all stakeholders in the supply chain to ensure that we either prevented those shortages or we have mitigated the impact of those shortages on patients. And I'm going to start with Visudyne. So Visudyne is a medicine that is used for macular degeneration due to age and a severe type of myopia, so it's loss of vision. So first I will go through the root cause of a shortage. This is a shortage that we experienced on and off for a number of years already and resulted from technical issues with the manufacture of the vials. So the machinery used to fill the vials. And this resulted in reduced manufacturing capacity. So we had a reduced production, and this resulted in worldwide shortages. Now, it is important to understand the context of this shortage. So we're talking about a product that for which we had only one manufacturer that was producing the active ingredient, and this was being supplied globally, so worldwide. And also important to mention that the actual process for the manufacture of the medicinal product is complicated and also requires a number of other important ingredients. So what have we done? So because there was one single manufacturer for the active substance, we provide support to the company so that they could establish a new supply chain, so that we would have an alternative and we could increase production capacity. And until such time that this additional supply chain is available, we're working with the company to ensure that we can distribute the limited stocks that we have fairly between EU countries. And in order to do so, we look at the previous demand of Visudyne in the different countries. And in this way, we can ensure that we distribute the product fairly among patients. Now, at national level, national competent authorities liaise with healthcare professionals and patients in their expert committees or task forces to develop guidance so that then those supplies that reach their country will then be made available for the patients that need the most. So this was Visudyne. I now move to another example, and the next one is Novo7. This is a medicine that is used to treat bleeding or to prevent bleeding after surgery. And next, please. The cause of the shortage here was issues with the packaging process for the medicinal product, and this resulted also in capacity constraints. So what did we do? Because there were issues with the packaging process, we allowed a temporary distribution of a package leaflet in English. But of course, we had to communicate with healthcare professionals and patients so that everyone was aware that we would potentially provide this medicinal product, Novo7, with the package leaflet in English. And what they could do, so reach out to their doctor or pharmacist if they needed information about the product. So I move now to the next case study, and here is Metalase is a thrombolytic. It's used for life-threatening condition, heart attack or stroke, and it's used to dissolve blood clots. So here, the root cause of this shortage, it was an increase in demand. So we had a higher number of patients using these thrombolytics, and this was coupled with manufacturing capacity constraints. So we had, again, only one manufacturing site for the medicinal product that was supplying these thrombolytics, worldwide. In addition, this was also a complex manufacturing process. So what did we do? So on one hand, it was important for us to increase supply because we had an increase in demand. And in addition to that, we wanted to prevent as much as possible disposal of usable stocks. So what we did is we allowed the use of the medicinal product beyond the expiration date. And of course, this was based in data that confirmed that this was safe for patients. So in this way, we didn't have to dispose any stocks of the medicinal product. We again communicate to healthcare professionals and to the public. But very important, we had to increase supply, to increase manufacturing production. So we worked with the company to accelerate the process for the approval of a new manufacturing site in Austria. And we don't have now for some time shortages of thrombolytics. So I will take now a little bit longer, perhaps, with these case studies. So the shortage of antibiotics, and I think we all know that antibiotics are used to treat bacterial infections. And I will refer as an example to shortages of amoxicillin. And first, I will start with the root cause of the shortage. So next, please. If you remember, in the winter of 22-23, there were widespread shortages of antibiotics, amoxicillin with clavulanic acid across the European Union. And this is because we had an increase in demand. So we had an increase in respiratory infections in the winter of that year. And this was also coupled with a reduction in the production of these antibiotics due to the COVID pandemic. Now, there is a seasonal need for these antibiotics. So we have an increase in respiratory infections during the autumn and winter. And what also happens is that we see there is an overuse of antibiotics for conditions for which the antibiotics are not effective. And here we're talking about cold and flu, so viral infections. So as a result, what happened is that several patients could not receive the antibiotics that were prescribed, and we had to find alternatives for these patients. So what have we done? So as soon as we made aware of these widespread shortages of antibiotics in November of 2022, we reached out to the main key suppliers of these antibiotics to find additional supplies or possible alternatives. Now, what we realized is that it was not possible to increase production of the antibiotics, and this is because the lead time for the production of antibiotics is long, so it's around 6 months. So in November 22, it was impossible to increase the production of antibiotics for that winter of 22-23. Nonetheless, we made sure that we secured additional supplies of antibiotics for patients in Europe. We were able to do so to a certain extent. Now, what we felt is that for the following winter, we needed to be prepared. And we need to prepare earlier on because of these long lead times for the production of antibiotics. So we started earlier on in February 2023, and we worked together with the European Commission, DG HERA, And we did a joint exercise on matching the supply and demand of a subset of key antibiotics. We started earlier on. We asked pharmaceutical companies for their supply projections, and we also asked information from the member states on the predicted demand for the antibiotics for the autumn-winter in 23-24. Based on this information, we matched supply and demand, and we could see what potentially we would have shortage for which particular products. And based on that, we issued recommendations from the MSSG, but not only for industry, but also for healthcare professionals and for patients. And for that reason, in October, we now imported this communication. We launched a social media campaign on the prudent use of antibiotics. We continued that exchange and that close interaction with the pharmaceutical companies. And what we've noticed that was in the winter of 23-24, we had only limited critical shortages. And what we could do as well, when critical shortages of an antibiotic were identified in a particular member state, we liaised with the pharmaceutical companies to move the stocks to that particular member state. And what we felt as well, what we realized it was important to start earlier on. So this preparedness activities has now been done in the upcoming to each autumn-winter. Similarly, we continue with this social media campaign, and we've launched it first in October of 23, but also in October of 25, and this year in October, again, we launched that social media campaign on the prudent use of antibiotics. So what have we done? If I can go through all the different measures, so we've been monitoring the availability of antibiotics since we were first notified in November 22 of the shortages of these antibiotics. We've seen that it's very important to have this close cooperation with companies to ensure that we can proactively help and provide support if there are any supply issues. The supply and demand exercise was very helpful because it identified potential shortfalls for certain products, and we could put measures in place well in advance from the autumn-winter. We've also seen that sharing best practices from between member states, so mitigating measures that work in one country can potentially also help another member state. And we've seen that share of best practice was extremely useful to help with availability of antibiotics. We have an expert group that we set up in November 22 that continues working together to monitor the situation and see if there is a need to put any measures in place. Clear communication to the public is key, and our social media campaign is an example, as well as other communication measures, such as a public statement that the MSSG put together also in the autumn-winter of 22-23. Last but not least, we work with international partners and other EU institutions, in particular, as already mentioned by Emmanuel, looking towards the situation in Australia is an example to see how the demand will be in the Northern Hemisphere and being better prepared. What have we done? So as I mentioned, we were able to secure extra supplies for EU countries. To redistribute the stocks between countries in a situation of a critical shortage, we allowed for flexibilities in packaging, so the use of foreign language in packs. And also, whenever possible, we've also assessed variations for authorization of new manufacturing sites for the production of these antibiotics. So what have we seen both in 23-24 autumn-winter and 24-25? As I mentioned, we had only a few critical shortages, and for the upcoming autumn-winter, we of course continue our monitoring activities. So I will now the next slide conclude. And as I mentioned, we work with national competent authorities to monitor supplies. We work closely with companies and also cooperate and work with stakeholders, primarily to prevent shortages, and if that is not possible, to mitigate their impact. we've seen that communication with healthcare professionals and patients is key, in particular for the antibiotics, but for all other shortages. And as already mentioned by previous speakers, we need to move from a reactive approach to a more proactive approach by preventing shortages. And companies are asked to prepare shortage prevention plans, and we can then tailor recommendations to address vulnerabilities in the supply chain, the production of critical medicines, to strengthen their supply chain. Two examples is recent MSSG recommendations that we issued for radiopharmaceuticals and for anti-D immunoglobulins. These, together with the additional measures that are foreseen in the new legislation, we can suddenly reinforce supply chains of critical medicines and ensure their supply for patients at all times. And thank you. I finished now, Juan, and pass it over to you, the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica. I think it's very good to be able to illustrate with these clear examples. And I'm sure that, for example, the one on antibiotic resonates in everyone because it was very much picked up by media and by journalists in different member states. And it's a great example of how we move from the initial reaction to the first wave to the subsequent season where proactive measures paid off. And we hope that we can report that in the next coming season, we also are able to manage it. So you have here the Slido, so that you want to submit questions, you can use it and we will take it afterwards after the presentation. So we move to the next section, and one of the measures that we have been taken very much in order to be able to have an impact is information, improving the information that we provide to patients and healthcare professionals, considering that they are active in the management of shortages. And we have with us Inga Abed, who works in the Stakeholder and Communication Division and who has been involved from many years on the work that we are doing in improving information on shortages at EU level and also in coordination with member states. So thank you, Inga, for presenting this aspect.
Thank you, Juan, and good afternoon, everyone. So I would just like to speak to you about where you, as patients and healthcare professionals, can find information on shortages. So as a patient and healthcare professionals, you know and have probably experienced at first hand the potential consequences of medicine shortages. And you also know how important it is to receiving timely information on shortages. When you are unaware of a shortage, you can't prepare. It is like it says on this slide, you can't fix what you can't see. Without timely information, doctors cannot adjust prescriptions, pharmacists cannot manage stocks and look for alternatives, and patients don't know what their options are, and this can create confusion and anxiety. So only well-informed patients and healthcare professionals can proactively seek solutions. If we go to the next slide, please. So where can you turn for information? Patients can turn to their doctor and pharmacist, who are usually the first point of call for all health-related issues. They can also turn to patient organizations, who play an important role, especially for rare disease communities, for example. And then there are the regulators, the EMA, and the National Medicines Agency's websites that provide information on shortages, for example, through searchable catalog listings. For healthcare professionals, they can also consult the EMA shortage catalogs or the National Medicine Regulator website. They also receive direct communication from the regulator and companies, the so-called DHPC or direct healthcare professional communication, or medicine shortage communication to inform them about a medicine shortage. And finally, also the professional organizations. If we go to the next slide. So I'd like to focus on the EMA shortage catalog. So EMA has been publishing information about shortages since 2016 in the format of a systematic listing to provide timely information on shortages, their causes, and the recommendation for patients and healthcare professionals. You can see the webpage on the screen, and EMA's shortage catalog lists all shortages that were assessed at EU level, Of course, these are not all shortages that occur in the EU, only those that are assessed at EMA. And for that reason, the EMA catalogue is also interlinked with national catalogues and allows to complement EMA information with that provided at national level. So if we go next, you can see here where you can access the EMA shortage catalogue, and next again, and the listing of the national catalogues. If we now move to the next slide. So this is an example of a shortage catalogue entry for a shortage of a medicine. You can see on here the reason for the shortage, whether it is a discontinuation due to commercial reasons or a manufacturing problem. If we go next, the member states affected in the EU. This can change very quickly, and it is advised to always check the latest status at a national level. Next, it also includes recommendations for healthcare professionals and patients. So this includes the use of potential alternatives and also some general advice on how to get prepared for patients, for example, to order repeat prescriptions on time. If we go to the next slide. Next. Yeah, just to mention that the shortage catalogues are actively disseminated to organizations and are also reflected in the newsletter. On this slide, you see the outcome of a survey that we carried out 2 years ago with patients and healthcare professionals to find out where they look for information on shortages. This was in the context of the shortage of the antibiotic amoxicillin, the diabetes medicine Ozempic, and a medicine for a rare eye condition, Visudyne. So we found that healthcare professionals, the shortage catalogue of national medicines agencies was a key resource. EMA catalogue is less well known, but it played a complementary role. Other key resources are professional organization and then the direct communication to healthcare professionals, the Dear Healthcare Professional letters. If we go to the next slide. For patients, the first stop was the doctor or pharmacist. And our survey also found that the shortage catalogues are not as widely known as for healthcare professionals. And there is a need to make this information more visible and disseminate it wider. If we go to the next slide. So this need for better awareness and getting informed is also one of the messages of our campaign that was launched today under the hashtag It Takes a Team. So this is EMA's first co-created campaign with patient and healthcare professional organizations. And through videos, social media messages, and real-life stories, the campaign really highlights the real people behind the system and bringing a human perspective to the efforts of addressing shortages. Finally, to conclude, timely and transparent communication is key in managing medicine shortages. And at EMA, we're committed to doing our part to providing clear and accessible and timely information. So if you're a patient or healthcare professional that's looking for updates, please check the EMA or the National Medicine Agency shortage catalogues to stay informed and plan ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Inga, for updating on these initiatives to really inform better to patients and healthcare professionals. And now we move, because I think this webinar was very much conceived together with the patients and the healthcare professionals. So we would like to have their views and their contribution from what, because again, they are not a passive actor in this situation, in this issue, and they are taking action and they are taking a lot of important measures to really contribute to find solutions. So we have a series of representatives from patients, healthcare professionals, and consumers who are going to provide their views in different aspects. And it's my pleasure to welcome Ansela Santos Quintano, who is Head of Food, Health, and Chemical Safety at BEUC, which is, as you may know, is the organization representing consumers in Europe. And Ancela is going to speak about the risk of falsifications and share practical advice on how to stay safe when looking for alternatives. Thank you, Ancela.
Thank you very much, Juan, and everyone for this webinar and for having us. Next. So I represent BEUC, the European Consumer Organization, which brings together 45 national consumer groups across 32 countries in Europe. We work on a wide range of consumer topics, including health, and we are a very proud member of the EMA's Patients and Consumers Working Party. Next. We pay a lot of attention to the issue of medicines shortages, which have become a major and growing problem across Europe. Consumer surveys conducted by our members in Portugal, Spain, Italy, and Belgium showed, for example, that nearly 40% of households faced a medicine shortage between January 2023 and January 2024. The surveys also shed light on the concrete impact that shortages have on patients and consumers. 43% of respondents, on average, across the 4 countries, reported that the shortage negatively impacted their health. For example, in some cases, it led to disease worsening or to patients suffering side effects from alternative treatments that are less adequate. In addition, in 27% of cases, on average, consumers faced additional costs, for example, because the alternative medications were more expensive. BEUC members, so national consumer groups, are actively addressing this issue by raising awareness about the problem through the surveys, such as the one I mentioned, and also through consumer communications, helping them understand the causes, risks, and ways to stay informed during shortages. Next. Consumer groups also raise awareness on the risks that consumers may encounter when they go online, a practice that some people turn to when they face a shortage. For example, a survey conducted in the UK by the Royal Pharmaceutical Society, which represents pharmacists, shows that 24% of patients who struggled to obtain their medicine tried to find it online. Buying from registered online pharmacies is, of course, an option, but when there's a shortage situation, it is crucial to be extra watchful when navigating online for various reasons. There is a risk of running into illegal sellers that try to capitalize on the situation. Also, medicines in shortage have been found in various studies to be widely available online without a required prescription or the involvement of a healthcare professional, which compromises patient safety. And there is a risk to end up getting a substandard or falsified medicine, as the WHO and other public health authorities have warned about. Next. The rise in the illegal online sale of GLP-1 medicines used to treat diabetes, but also obesity and overweight in adults with health-related problems is a concrete example of such risks. These products, bought illegally online, are not approved and do not fulfill the required standards of quality, safety, and efficacy. They may not contain at all the active substance that treats the disease and may even include harmful substances. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, our members, for example, OCU in Spain and Testacha and Testancop in Belgium, have helped to warn the public about this issue in line with the recommendations from the EMA and other public bodies. Next. As consumers, there are some things that we can do to mitigate, to some extent, the impact of shortages. First of all, in our day-to-day lives, it's important to stay on top of the prescription to avoid running out of the medication. Then, when there's a shortage, it is important to talk to the doctor or pharmacist, for example, to discuss safe and appropriate alternatives. It is also useful to check the recommendations of the National Medicines Agency and the EMA, and also consumers can turn to national consumer groups or patient groups for more information. When buying online, particularly, it is very important to look on the website for the common EU logo with the national flag. Actually, when you find this logo and you click on it, it would link you to the national register where this website and pharmacy should appear on the list. It's important to bear in mind that not in all member states it is allowed actually to buy medicines that are on prescription only online. For example, in Spain and Belgium is not allowed. In case of running into suspicious products, it's important to report them to the national competent authority, for example, the Medicines Agency, to alert them on the situation. Next. So I would like to stress, of course, that patients and consumers are the main victims of medicine shortages, and this has been mentioned before. So there is as much as they can do when they find themselves in this situation, which is also a situation that causes stress, anxiety. So while there are some things that they can do, and I've mentioned them, to mitigate the impact, for example, report and seek information about shortages, all this must be enabled in the first place by the authorities. So patients cannot stay properly informed about a supply disruption if in their country there's no user-friendly public database on shortages. So it is very important that the public authorities ensure adequate communication on shortages and also consult patients, consumers, and healthcare professionals about mitigation measures in order to minimize the health impact of the situation. Likewise, it is important to introduce at EU level policy measures that can help prevent shortages in the first place. For example, and it has been mentioned, the pharmaceutical legislation revision brings an opportunity to require that companies develop prevention plans for their medicines. And it is also very important to strengthen the monitoring of the rising online marketplaces and to enhance collaboration amongst the various entities that have a role to play, including those responsible for border control and organized crime. Next. So with these remarks on the importance also to act at the national level, I would like to finish the presentation. I have one more slide. Also, yes, I want to acknowledge also my colleague Oriane for having helped me prepare this presentation. I remain available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ansela. I think it's very clear, and I think it's a very important message and a very important aspect, which I think it's now covered. So the next speaker is George Batista, and George is a senior professional affairs advisor at PGU. PGU is the pharmaceutical group of the European Union, and they represent pharmacists, community pharmacists, and he will illustrate the important role that pharmacies play in supporting patients during shortages and how shortages affect patients, and offering insights on the solutions that pharmacists can offer as well from their point of view. Thank you, George, for presenting.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Juan, and thank you, EMA, for being here this afternoon to present the role of community pharmacists in mitigating shortages. So for those of you who don't know PGU, we are the organization representing community pharmacists in 33 countries, and we represent over 160,000 community pharmacists in pharmacies in over 400,000 community pharmacists in over 40 different organizations. So medicine shortages, as we are discussing today, they represent a triple threat. So on one hand, they have a negative impact on patients' health. We've heard about this today. They also have a negative impact on pharmacists' daily work, and I will explain a bit more in the next couple of minutes how these medicine shortages impact the work of pharmacists. And also, medicine shortages have a negative impact on citizen stress, as the trust in the healthcare system and the supply chain is being also eroded. So shortages have different root causes, and we know that we've listened today over 50% of root causes of shortages are due to manufacturing issues. So we cannot act on every aspect, but the fair bit that we can do, pharmacists are there to support their patients. And in fact, every year we ask our members, how is the situation with medicine shortages over the last 12 months? Every year in January, around January, we publish a report. And consistently over the last 6 years, we have seen that all countries surveyed have experienced shortages. So over the last 12 months. So this is the situation that has been consistent over the last years. And we see that there is a deterioration of the situation. We ask, in comparison with the 12 months before, how is the situation evolving? Is it getting worse? Is it staying the same? Is it improved? And what we see is that from the last survey, the situation has been stagnating in the vast majority of the countries, in 61% of the countries. But then if we have to look on the 24 months before, so 2 years before, we see that the situation was really getting worse in the vast majority of the countries. So with this, we mean that we are now reaching a point, a stagnating point, but it's still a very bad situation. When we ask countries what are the medicines that are mostly in short supply, we see the top three that is indeed a trifecta. So on one hand, antibiotics, so anti-infectives for systemic use. We've heard this afternoon about the shortage of antibiotics in the winter 22-23. And in fact, antibiotics still rank consistently high in the number of countries that experience shortages of antibiotics. Medicines for cardiovascular system. So here we were talking, for example, for hypertension. We see also that this is a class of medicines that have been ranked consistently high in short supply, but also medicines for alimentary tract and metabolism, which includes, for example, medicines for diabetes. We know that medicine shortages create impacts on patients, and these ranges from distress, inconvenience, but also interruption of treatment or increased co-payments. All of the 28 countries that we surveyed responded that medicine shortages create distress and inconvenience to patients. But also this, in 82% of the cases, they lead to interruption of treatment. As medicines are not currently in supply, they need the treatment might need to be stopped. But also in 61% of the cases, countries experience increased co-payments because the alternatives are, for example, more expensive. So you have to increase the out-of-pocket payments from patients, or also the alternatives are not reimbursed. But also we see that there is a less trust in medicines, in pharmacies, and also the healthcare system in general, as consistently people go to the pharmacy and their medicines are not available. This creates also significant impact on pharmacies, and we understand that there is a reduced patient trust in the healthcare system in general, but also in pharmacists and in pharmacies, and also reduced employee satisfaction. So pharmacies, of course, they're not happy when they see consistently that the order to their wholesalers comes incomplete for various reasons. Also, there are some financial loss due to time invested in mitigating shortages. And here we have snippets from our report on medicine shortages on countries that saying that the medicine shortages has increased the workload in dealing with mitigating these problems. And this is an intensive and time-consuming part of the daily work of pharmacists. But it's not only the daily work of pharmacists in creating, let's say, solutions that circumvent bureaucracies. It's also the fact that community pharmacies are the face of a problem that they don't have the root causes, and they don't have also the proper means to solve. So we've also seen some hostility and assaults of patients that get frustrated when their medicines are not available in community pharmacies. There are a few legal solutions that pharmacists are allowed to, but more should be done. So in 89% of the countries, we see that pharmacists are able to substitute to a generic. And in 64% of the cases, so around 2/3, they're able to prepare a compound formulation. So they prepare a medicine that is tailored for the patient. And in 61% of the cases, they can source the medicine from an alternative source. That could be, for example, another pharmacy or a manufacturer. And specifically, we see that both compounding and finding alternative sources have increased over the last years as suitable solutions for pharmacists to find solutions to patients. There's also other solutions that can be implemented, but these are with a lesser extent. We see also that community pharmacists are spending more and more time to deal with medicine shortages, and the amount of time has been increasing throughout the years. So currently in 2024, so last year, on average, pharmacists spend 11 hours per week dealing with medicine shortages. And this, of course, comes framed onto current workforce shortages that we see in the pharmacy profession. So we have less pharmacists contributing to community pharmacist work. And if we amount this time of 11 hours per week dealing with medicine shortages, it is time that is taken from providing care, for example, from providing pharmacy services that can lead to better patient outcomes. With this in mind, pharmacists can and healthcare professionals can have a say and can have actions in order to prevent and mitigate shortages. So pharmacists are experts in medication. They communicate effectively and they are able to counsel their patients. So first of all, they reassure patients that this is a temporary situation. And as the pharmacists are the healthcare professional that is closest to the population, they are able to convey a reassuring message. We try as much as possible to look for alternative solutions, to available alternatives for medicines, and also to source them from different sources when they are available. And whenever possible, we substitute either generically or therapeutically. We adjust, for example, the dosage or the strength, or we compound a medicine to the patient. Pharmacies are also able to effectively manage the stock. So as we know that our patients and communities, and quite often pharmacies have a long-standing relationship with patients and quite often generational. So we know that the patients, what medicines patients need, and also we're able to forecast and foresee the demand. We also prevent stockpiling at patient level and also medicines hoarding, for example, through controlled distribution mechanisms. And also we are able to provide clear communication with authorities, but more can be done. And this comes also with reporting systems, so providing pharmacists with opportunities to report shortages and also expanding the scope of practice. So only 2/3 of the countries did not increase, let's say, legislation or implement legislation making pharmacies able to expand their scope of practice. So we see that between prevention and mitigation, of course, we'll prefer investing on prevention, but when this is not possible, mitigation is the way to go. However, we see that we need further support, for example, from governments on passing legislation to expand the scope of practice for pharmacists, and is coming, for example, with doing therapeutic substitution in a protocol-based approach, both with the agreement of doctors and patients, in order to make sure that pharmacies can provide effective solutions to patients. So I'd like to thank you for your attention, and I remain available for any questions you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, George. I think it's very clearly presented. There are very useful results of this survey, which illustrates very well the impact it has. But also we appreciate very much to have a little bit of insights of what measures that you can take and how you are approaching this issue. So we go back now to the patients again. And it's a pleasure to welcome Solène Jouan from the European Patients Forum. And she will present findings from a recent survey that has done to their patient members on how they communicate about shortages and the approach that they are taking to monitor and report them to authorities, encouraging people to take part of the whole process. So thank you very much, Solène, for being with us.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for the EMA to take the opportunity to invite us as patient organization. My name is Solène Jouan. And for those of you who do not know our organization, so we are a patient organization based in Brussels, and we represent all the European patients across the European Union and abroad. We have 82 members that are all national coalition or disease-specific organization. And unfortunately, indeed, we have been working at EPF for many, many years on the topic of shortages, because from very common medicines to antibiotics, we talk about it. Our members are unfortunately very impacted by shortages. They report to us. And the fact is, it's a matter of value and principle for us at EPF that we work on this aspect, because we want to be sure that everyone in the European Union has a fundamental right to have access to the medicines they need when they need them. And so recently, we have decided to work even more on this topic, and we have decided to create inside the European Patient Forum an internal task force dedicated to shortages. So it is composed of EPF members that are very dedicated to find solutions on shortages, or members that are really, really impacted by the shortages and want to find solutions for their own members. And in light of, with regard to this webinar, that we know that we were very happy to participate, we have decided actually to conduct a survey at EPF with the task force to ask them exactly what can patient organizations do to prevent and manage shortages, to try to collect and extrapolate the best practices that exist at the national level that really show that patient organizations have an added value for regulatory authority, they can be a partner to prevent and manage shortages. So I'm very happy to present indeed the result of this survey. And next slide, please. We decided actually to divide the survey in 4 categories of questions. So first, we wanted to know what can patient organizations do to prevent and manage shortages in terms of information campaigns, on reporting on shortages, but also what can patient organizations do and what are the best practices that we find at the national level in terms of monitoring of shortages. And finally, how are the best practices when patients and patient organizations are really involved with the national health authorities and with the national federal agencies. And so I'm very happy to present the results for these 4 categories. So if you can go to the next slides, please. So this is something that has been already mentioned by the previous speakers, actually, but it's very important that information are communicated. And how you do that, the best practices that we extrapolated from the surveys, like when patient organizations are working closely with the National Health Authority, the National Health Ministry, their agencies, it's very valuable because they can first base their information campaign and run information campaign based on official news, but also they can ensure that the communication campaign is very lay languages and is communicated in a clear way, not in a too technical way. But also something very important is like, we are living in a time where there is a lot of conspiracy theory, and the fact that you have this working together between the patient organization and the national authorities, it reinforces the trust and the public trust in the regulatory process. Because this is something that was mentioned before, but when a patient and where patients in plural are impacted by diseases, you can find by shortages, you can find anger, but also a mistrust in your authorities. So by having this collaboration, this really helps in reinforcing public trust. So this is one of the best practices. If you can go to the next slide, please. On reporting on shortages, unfortunately, this is not the norm across the EU, but we have actually patient organizations that can report directly shortages. And this is fundamental because sometimes, and I would say most of the time, patient organizations are the first one to understand that there is clearly a situation of shortages, because they are in contact on a day-to-day basis with their patients, and they can understand that at this moment there is a shortages. And the fact that they can report back, or they can have a direct contact with someone in the federal agency, national agency, or national health authority can really ensure that the communication on these shortages is reported. And actually, I wanted to really focus on one specific example from our national coalition in Cyprus. They set up what they call the Patient Observatory. It's kind of a platform where the patient in Cyprus can report, can complain on an element based on their health. And most of the case, the complaint that our national coalition from Cyprus received is based on medicine shortages. Thanks to this information, our national coalition in Cyprus can contact directly the health authorities in charge of the shortages and report back that there is a shortage situation, but also gather the details on the reason of the shortages, the cause of the shortages, to report back this information to the patients who submitted the complaint. This creates a trust in the system, transparency, accountability, but also it really shows that patient organizations can collect the data and monitor the situation of the shortages for their own members. So this is one of the examples. If you can go to the next slide, please. On the monitoring of shortages, so this is something we mentioned also before, but to have transparent information is key. And it's not all the case, it's not known all the time, but you have in some countries very well done website created by the national authorities to report on an up-to-date basis the shortages situation. And this is very important to have a website that is very user-friendly, using not too many technical terms, but also not only saying that there is a shortage on this medicine A or this medicine B, but really explaining why there is this shortage, what is the situation, the duration of the shortages, but also the possible alternative. And for this example, I did not put it on the the slide, but the case of Belgium is a website that we could take into account as a best practices. Unfortunately, it's not happening in all the countries of the EU, but it should happen better, because this is also a question of having transparent information and to find the way to have this transparent information. And finally, if you can go to the next slide, one of the best practices that we can show is that really you need to involve patient organization as part of the solution and a possible policy alternative to be put in place to manage and prevent shortages. Because they are the one at the end of the day that they are suffering from the situation. We're mentioning all the time, but sometimes policies and solutions can be adopted, but they will not change the situation of the patient. By involving patient organization as part of a working group, as part of a dedicated shortages task force, this really shows that patient organization can bring their added value and share the patient preferences for each solutions to be implemented, because otherwise you risk to have solutions and initiative implemented, but they are not actually changing the situation of the patients. And also to show accountability and transparency, this is part of a democratic health landscape. So finally, if you can go to the final slide, what I wanted to say, of course, this survey was done with some of the members of EPF to collect the best practices. As I mentioned, these best practices, unfortunately, are not implementing in all of the European Union. Our role as EPF is to ensure that all of our members have a possibility to contribute and to be a partner for the regulatory agency in the management and the prevention of shortages. So for that, we will for sure at EPF advocate to have all of these elements shared. And if I may, one last thing, please ensure that patients are not only passive, like they are not only the one, they should not only have as action to not order too many treatments or to be sure that they have a prescription up to date. They need to be partner around the table. This is very important. They don't have only a passive role, they have an active role in the management and prevention of shortages. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Solène. I think it's a very strong statement, and we very much appreciate your efforts to empower your community in order to be an active partner in this process. Thanks again. And we have our last speaker just to go before the Q&A session. And I would like to welcome Marcia Podestà, who is the president of the European Federation of Allergy and Airways Disease Patients Association. And she's going to walk through tourism shortages where they have been directly involved and contributing. So thank you, Marcia, for presenting.
Thank you, Juan, for your kind introduction. I'm also president of the Food Allergy Italia. So I want to thank you for inviting me to join this webinar. IFA is a Brussels-based umbrella organization and is, among others, a member of the EMA Patient Consumer Working Party, and is always pleased to actively participate in EMA initiatives. Our mission is to be the voice of allergy and chronic respiratory diseases across Europe, advocating for their needs and shaping policy decisions affecting their health. We build a strong patient network, share best practices, and create patient-driven projects, working closely with healthcare professionals and other stakeholders to improve health. Shortages deeply impact our patient community, and in the short time I have today, I hope to show how patients can help to prevent and manage shortages. Okay, if you move it. As a patient association, IFA is involved in European action on medicine shortages. IFA has disease-specific working groups where medicine shortages are being discussed on a regular basis, and members shared information. As mentioned before, we are members of EMA, PCWP, but also the Critical Medicines Alliance and the Health and Emergency Response Authority here, Civil Society Forum, and the European Patients Forum's Task Force on Shortages. IFA is also engaging in EU legislative work, which has impact on our patients and associations as their advocates. For example, the Critical Medicine Act is a priority for us, as it is a chance to improve medicine availability for patients in the EU. It's directly linked to how medicines reach patients more safely and more equally. We have also engaged on stockpiling measures and medical countermeasures for public health threats, two initiatives that contribute in preventing exactly this risk of shortages. We also steer a collaboration on EU policies of all European level respiratory patient groups and healthcare professionals together, called the European Lung Health Group, to work on the topic of medicine shortages, and for instance, in the form of a high-level forum of discussion among key Commission officials. Up next, IFA will be responding to the consultation on the EU Biotech Act, because one of our key asks is to improve access to biologics and to reduce root causes of medicine shortages. Can we move to the next slide? Thank you. So respiratory diseases are particularly impacted by shortages, and EMA monitors critical medicine shortages that might lead to a crisis situation. For example, some of the medicine supply shortages mentioned in EMA's shortages catalog relevant to our diseases, the respiratory diseases, are salbutamol-based inhalation products for asthma and COPD, or Hamcam for lung diseases, respiratory tract diseases, and neoplasm. The problem of shortages has been recognized by the European Court of Auditors, which points to a stark reality for our patient community. Record levels of shortages were reported in 2023 and 2024. There is not yet an effective framework for critical shortages of medicines fully in place. Fragmentation within the single market continues to hinder the availability of medicines across the EU. Therefore, ICA push for the Commission to improve the systems and launch coordinated action to address the problem. Finally, considering medical devices, the EU F-gases regulation creates concern for potential future shortages of inhaler, a key life-saving treatment combining drug and device. Can you move to the next slide? Thank you. So let's look more closely at an EU-level shortage of medicine, which is deeply impacting our community. Salbutamol is used for treating asthma, COPD, and further conditions, and is often life-saving. There has been an increase in demand for salbutamol inhaling products, combined with manufacturing not keeping up and further manufacturing, pricing issues, etc., which has led to a critical shortage of salbutamol for patients, and this puts patients at risk. However, faced with this risk, patients went online or to another country to buy their medicines, and they can be risky, as we listened from other speakers earlier. IFA has been active on the issue of salbutamol shortages. Notably, we have been the contact to EMA, held a webinar with members, reviewed the EMA public information on the shortages, contacted the main producer of salbutamol for information, and we are listed on EMA salbutamol webpage as a stakeholder. Let's move to another example. Thank you. So I'd like to highlight how a shortage can be an indicator for EMA through the example of syringe adrenaline autoinjectors in Italy. We know that AAI are life-saving treatment used to treat a serious allergic reaction called anaphylaxis in an emergency, so through injecting a single fixed dose of adrenaline. There have been shortages of this kind of device across Europe, but with, as we listened earlier, these shortages affecting all European countries, but in a different way. So in Italy, after being contacted by the Italian medicine agency and the manufacturer, we established an open channel with them, highlighting critical issues and solutions to ensure that every patient has an adrenal autoinjector. We submitted the request to prioritize small dose autoinjectors, mostly needed by children. We raised the issue at the IFA level, alerting IFA patients, and through dialogue with other patient associations at a European level. We mapped patients' concerns across Italy. And finally, AIFA, so the Italian Medicine Agency, communicated the AI shortage to EMA. I urge patient organizations and patients to take action with authorities when experiencing a shortage and share their situation with peers in other countries and their European umbrella associations. Shortages will spill over to other countries, so it's important to flag the issue as soon as possible. So the final, can we move to the next? Thank you. So this leads us to the topic of today's discussion: how can patients best be involved in preventing shortages? There are several considerations which can help to conclude our consideration. Buying more medication than needed can contribute to shortages. So patients should only purchase medicines as prescribed and needed. Second, patients and patient associations can help by reporting any difficulties in obtaining medicines to their pharmacists or healthcare providers, and it helps authorities detect early warning signs. Third, if offered an alternative medicine during a shortage, patients should follow instructions carefully and ask questions to understand differences in dosage or side effects. Fourth, patients should avoid pressuring healthcare providers for unnecessary prescriptions of specific brands, which can strain supply. Fifth, reliable information about medicine availability should be available for patients. EMA, national agencies and patient organizations often publish updates and guidance, and this can be a key tool. However, communication should be done in a way to prevent panic. And finally, patients should join or support patient organizations that advocate for better supply chain transparency and sustainable pharmaceutical policy. So my fundamental message today is that patient organizations are key stakeholders in medicine shortage situations, alongside authorities and manufacturers, and patient voice needs to be embedded in the decision-making process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcia. And that's really very clear about these two very good examples, which illustrates how this is really happening in real life. Okay, so I think now we can try to go through some questions and answers. We are happy to take questions internally from the WebEx, from the colleagues who have joined to the WebEx, but also from the people who are following the event broadcast. And in total, we have over 500 people, and I would like to alternate. So I think you can raise your hand within the WebEx system, and I will be giving the floor to you. We encourage that you open your camera so that it's more interactive, but it's entirely up to you. And I will alternate between questions from the audience and questions that have been sent through the Slido. So if we have any question on the WebEx, otherwise I will ask my colleague Inga to read the questions that we are receiving through the Slido. And I think we can start, Inga, with the Slido questions.
Okay, yes, Juan, sure. So I'm reading them as they come in. So we have a question here from Dirk de Rijt from the European Society of Endocrinology. How can EMA act when a manufacturer stops a medicine because of commercial reasons, but there is no other supplier to secure future supply? We have seen this with older products in the rare disease space, therapeutic or diagnostic.
Okay, thank you very much. That's clear. And I will ask the different speakers to address it. Perhaps this Monica Diaz can take it, and perhaps we can maybe complement with aspects on communication later with Melanie. But Monica, please.
Thank you, Juan, and thank you very much for the question. So, of course, this is a very difficult situation for the patients, also for healthcare professionals, and for us. So, I think one thing that we need to highlight is ultimately the decision to market or not to market the product is made by the company who sells it. But what is important for us is to have early warning on those decisions, so that we, together with national competent authorities, can prepare for this and help patients and healthcare professionals as much as possible by looking for alternative medicines or alternative treatment options. So first, what we do at EMA, we reach out to all the stakeholders so that we make sure that we fully understand the situation. and we look for ways to support those that are affected. Of course, that this can be by finding new companies that come to the market with a new product to meet the demand. Also looking for alternatives in other jurisdictions, see if there's any potential for those to be of value in the EU as well. And also, we look at ways to whether we can maintain the existing product on the market. I think perhaps I would like to mention that in the new pharma legislation, there are provisions whereby, for instance, there's recommendations to look for other companies that may take over the sale of the product when these situations occur. And we, as here at EMA, we will be a facilitator for this process as well. So I think that would be perhaps my immediate answer, Juan. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's well covered. And indeed, in these cases, we also remain transparent. And I don't know, Melanie, you would like to complement?
Yeah, and thank you, Doug, for the question. I think indeed it's a very challenging situation when this happens, particularly in the rare disease space. And just to complement what Monica said, of course, here timely communication is absolutely key. And as Inga mentioned, in her presentation, you can't fix what you can't see. So we would ensure that the national competent authorities across the EU are informed, so the response can be coordinated. It'll be important to provide the information to patients, to healthcare professionals, advising on switching if appropriate. And this could take the form of, publication in the catalogue, communication to healthcare professionals through a Dear Healthcare Professional letter. We would engage with relevant stakeholders, for example, the relevant patient organisations, healthcare professional organisations, to ensure their members are informed and they can support with managing the shortages. And you heard concrete examples today from Björk, from PGEU, from EPF, from EFA, on how such stakeholder organisations can really play a key role in preventing or managing shortages. Thank you.
Thank you very much, both of you, Monica and Melanie. So we have more questions submitted through Slido. I don't know if someone from the room would like to raise their hand. Otherwise, I think we can read the next question. Inga?
Yes, thank you, Juan. So the next question is from an anonymous participant. Is there a plan in place for a unified platform for reporting shortages rather than double reporting nationally and to EMA separately?
Okay, no, that's a very clear question. And shall I give the floor to Emmanuel?
Yeah, thank you, Juan. And it's actually a very important question. And to that, I would say absolutely there is a plan to do so. And we've actually made great progress toward that. We are working in the context of what we call the European Shortage Monitoring Platform, which is a centralized IT system that we have launched earlier this year in 2025. And I was supported by the European Medicine Agency, but definitely working with the various national competent authority and the Commission to deliver that. And the objective of that platform, it's called ESMP, is to monitor, prevent and manage medicine shortage across the European Union by collecting real-time data, both from the pharmaceutical industry and the manufacturer, but as well as the national competent authority. And the idea is to allow for a faster action and reduce the impacts of shortages. So in the context of the ESMP, so that European Shortage Monitoring Platform, we make sure that the data is interoperable between the national systems and the European level system, so that we can use them as much as possible in an automated fashion, keeping in mind that we do have to deal with quite a heterogeneous set of national systems. But very much so, we're looking at improving data quality, standardization, and connectivity, and with the not only the ambition to deliver an impact on shortage, but very much so to avoid duplication in reporting. So hopefully that answered that question.
I think it does. Thank you very much, Emmanuel. I think we can go to next question. Inga?
Yes, so the next question is on, again, from an anonymous participant. What actions do EMA authorities take to prevent shortage of human insulin as one of the biggest supplier announced to stop supplying such insulins?
Maybe Monica, because I think the team has been working a lot on this. You are well placed to answer this one.
Yes, indeed. We, together with the national competent authorities, have been monitoring the availability of insulins, both human and analogs, for a number of years now. And we've seen a trend in discontinuation of human insulins and increased reliance on analog insulins. We are, of course, in close communication with all the companies that manufacture these products. What we are doing is also a risk assessment. So we identify the risk of each discontinuation in each member state. And this is because we have, on one hand, companies that discontinue some products in some member states, but not in others. And also we have different alternatives available in the different countries. So this risk analysis has to be done per member state, and then we assess what is the impact of a withdrawal in a particular member state. And then once we have that information, then we can liaise with the alternative companies for the alternative products and see whether they are in a position to increase production capacity to meet, of course, the shortfall that is left by the withdrawal of the one product from a particular market. So this is done together with the member states at country level, and it is a very challenging activity because it is changing constantly, and so we have to see the impact of each of the withdrawals in each member state. So for the various insulins. So this is something that we continue to look into closely, and we closely monitor with the member states. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica. I think it answers, and indeed, I think has been an area where we have put a lot of efforts. I would like to give the floor to Solène, who would like to make a comment. Solène?
Yeah, thank you very much. A very short comment. I wanted to say it at the end of my intervention. I am muted. No, I'm not muted. I received a notification from my WebEx. Okay. The WebEx is strange. Yeah, I wanted to say something at the end of the intervention, but I was scared to be out of time. It was more from the presentation of Mr. Emmanuel Cormier, because I took a picture when you're presenting that managing shortages in the EU is a collective effort, and it will be a call for action that I will ask if it's possible to you, because for the moment, like I can say that as part of a collective effort, you request or you are sharing that patients should stay informed, don't ask for more medicine than needed, and order medicine on time, but really we are doing as the healthcare professional. We also report early shortages. We also we try to help to identify alternative. We also try to ensure we communicate the right information. So to more also show the active role that we have as patient and patient organization. So just more comment or my call to ensure that really we are seen as also partner in the reporting and managing of shortages. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for another question. Inga?
Yes, this one is a question from Laura Volpi. Which measures are taken to ensure practically relevant shortage information to healthcare professionals? In reality, information is provided to hospital pharmacies only late in ordering processes. DHPCs are no reliable resource, especially in supply reductions.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe Melanie, can you take this one?
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's to stress, what I mentioned before about how important timely communication is. And I mean, here we really are committed to working with stakeholder organizations to see how we can best get the information disseminated in the best possible way, but also in the timeliest way. And here working with the national competent authorities and the networks is so important. I think, the pharmacist organizations, you're incredibly active and you play a really important role here in getting the information through to your members. So we would be happy to discuss further your experiences on that. But I mean, the commitment is certainly there on our side. Over.
Thank you very much. And it illustrates the real challenge to really reach to the individuals and how all these collaborations can really improve. I think we have time to for one more before we can close for it. So I don't know if Inga, you can try to select the rest of them. We can take them and we can follow up in writing. But you would like to take the last one?
Yes, sorry, Juan. The last one, it was a question received anonymously. It was about how to increase and strengthening the cooperation between EU member state competent authorities in providing information on shortages of medicines.
Thank you. Perhaps Monica?
Yes, so I think what I would say here is that we have to continue working on what we built so far. So the SPOC working party that was mentioned by Emmanuel in his presentation, where the single points of contact for shortages in each national competent authority share information, has been put in place in 2019, and this was really a voluntary activity. Because member states see the benefit of working together and sharing information on shortages. So I think now this is then this forum has been formalized through EMA's extended mandate with Regulation 22123, and it's going to be further expanded in the context of the new pharma legislation. So we, of course, will continue building on the efforts so far. The SPOC Working Party meets on a monthly basis, and the members feel that there is really a good cooperation and sharing of information, and member states help each other as well. So we just have to build further from what we have established so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica. I think indeed it stresses how important it is. So I think we are almost out of time. We have 2 minutes, and maybe I can try to wrap up. And I think a lot has been covered. I think there is no single angle. I think we have touched one way or another. And I mean, we have listened in a key message, and I'm very pleased that it came from all the different speakers, that shortages is a shared responsibility. And it's not just an issue affecting regulators or nothing, patients, health professionals, everyone, and the Commission, we have listened, everyone is taking their stake. And the good thing is very impressive to see that it's a reality. I think I'm really impressed by the work that organizations, patient organizations, pharmacists, consumers, that all are doing. And this is already a reality, and you are contributing very much to mitigate and manage this. We have seen that there is no one size which fits all solutions. And I think we need to be very, very tailor-made. Every situation requires specific actions. So we have different tools, different mechanisms, and we have to activate them depending on the situation to get the best response in a good time, because it's also a matter of acting timely and even in a more, let's say, prevention rather than reaction. The measures take time. We have seen that. I think to really be able to make impact, it takes time to really see that. And the approach even is evolving. So we are moving, and as we have seen, from a very reactive responses to proactive strategies. And I think it's great to see that this is not only from the point of view of the regulators. We've seen this message from the patients, and they really want to really take actions to avoid the things, all the issues coming up. And we saw very good examples, such as the antibiotics, where the first winter season was quite challenging. And because we took measures and were proactive, the situation was better on the following season. The new legislation, and we have heard from the Commission, will strengthen further the mandate of everybody and the supply chains and enhance availability of critical medicines. And that's really important, that at least the most critical medicines are the ones which receive more attention, and we take more proactive actions there. So I hope you find this useful. We believe this is a priority for us, medicines regulators, and I can see that it's a priority for other groups. So I would like to thank all the efforts we have been put on this webinar from all parties, and to thank all the speakers and the colleagues who have organized the event. Also to all the participants who made the time. As I saw, I think we had over 500 participants following up, and we will publish this webinar together with all the presentations. Hopefully that this can be used by other colleagues in order to learn more about what at EU level we are all together doing to tackle the issue of shortages. And we finally would invite you to give us feedback on how this tool to provide information on certain aspects can work. It will take literally 1 minute, and we encourage that you take your phone and do it in situ, because that way, it's very easy, and we will get important information that we can use in order to improve the way that we facilitate information on different aspects and different topics. So with this, I will close. I will just say that other questions that we may have received through the Slido, we will follow up in writing, and we encourage you to go to the Contact Us section of the EMA website, and you can submit any question that we will follow up and we'll come back to you. Thank you on behalf of EMA and on behalf of the colleagues involved for your attention and on this issue. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.